Over the past 9 weeks, we have been watching the crested pigeon species around Melbourne and documenting our observations using Climate Watch, aiming to observe the impacts that climate change and global warming have on this specific species of bird. Climate Watch was developed by Earthwatch and the University of Melbourne to observe how the changes in rainfall and temperature have an impact on the seasonal behaviours of Australian animals and plants. Climate Watch allows anyone to get involved by recording their observations using the Climate Watch app. The crested pigeon is one of the species that has been able to make the transition from an inland bird to a common urban bird, as this species was originally an arid and semi-arid inland Australian bird. They originally migrated to Adelaide, and now they are commonly sighted in Sydney, Canberra and Melbourne. The crested pigeon is usually seen in lightly wooded grasslands within both rural and urban areas, but within the vicinity of water. They consume native seeds as well as some leaves and insects, which they prefer to eat in large groups and congregate to drink at waterholes together as well, as it is observed that one looks up for danger while others feed. Drinking commonly involves waiting in nearby trees for long periods of time before coming down to drink. It is observed that when approached, they take off quickly to gain safety in higher ground, such as trees, and are seen to ruffle their feathers to appear larger on landing. Also, in flight, they glide with downturned wings. The pigeons are able to construct nests from twigs in a tree or sometimes in dense bushy areas, where both the male and the female take the responsibility of incubating the eggs. Breeding is most common in crested pigeons around August to March. They commonly lay 2 eggs, which hatching occurs after 18 to 21 days, and are cared for before leaving the nest after 20 to 25 days. Crested pigeons have a plumped build, a rounded shaped body and grey feathers with pink or blue colour seen on their wings. A distinctive feature of a thin black crest on the top of their head, making them distinguishable from other pigeon species.
Our observations began in early August and continued until the beginning of October. During this period of time, we recognised many recurring behaviours. We found that the birds were never observed alone. They were always near another or in a group. As observed on the 10th of August at 1:15 p.m, there were birds in 2 lots of pairs on the ground, spotted at Maralinga Primary School in Keysborough. However, when approached, they dispersed, taking refuge in nearby trees and on top of buildings. When nesting, one bird usually is always on the nest while the other is close by. We believe an example of this was seen on the 20th of August at 3:20 p.m. in Keysborough, when a nesting bird appeared to be accompanied by another that was feeding on the ground. However, this could have just been a coincidence at 5 p.m, as the pigeon flew across the grassland. This sound is caused by air passing over particular feathers on the wing and is used as a warning to the flock that danger may be near. Examples of the crested pigeon calling were observed many times, including on the Monash Clayton campus, when a bird flew from one high tree to another. When reaching the second tree, short calling sounds were made. Again, in Chelsea Bicentennial Park, 2 birds were perched on different trees, making very loud, alternating calls. The crested pigeon was observed in all weather types between morning to mid-afternoon. However, most observations occurred in August and September, so the weather was mostly cold, wet and windy. Although we didn't go out and look for the pigeons whilst it was raining, they were observed post-rainfall around puddles or out in the sun if it was available. Due to the pigeon's nature, we were unable to get clear up-close pictures, as when approached, about 10 to 15 metres away, they would fly off.
All of our group findings have implicated the importance of water in the climatic changes that have affected the crested pigeon. Although birds possess variable characteristics and behaviours, all require similar basal survival requirements such as food, water, shelter and warmth. Crested pigeons deal with externally imposed heat loads as they are endothermic, and water may be scarce in these arid to semi-arid environments they usually inhabit. The pigeon's recent broad distribution may be attributed to this water scarcity. The lack of water may have influenced the pigeons to find it somewhere else, away from its usual environment. All birds lose water to their environment by evaporation from the moist lining of the lungs as they breathe, and although they lack specialised sweat glands, birds also lose water through the skin. Water is also lost when waste products are excreted. The rate of water loss depends on several factors. A key one, of course, is the weather. In hot, dry conditions, water loss is at a high as birds use evaporation to cool themselves down. Another factor is the size of the bird. Water loss, like heat loss, is relatively higher in small birds compared to the large because of the greater surface area in relation to volume in small birds. This particular species is armed with the following important characteristics that have allowed it to become broadly distributed in a range of environments and to furthermore cope with water scarcity. The pigeons have a relatively high body temperature. They have a reduction of expired air temperature by nasal countercurrent heat and water exchange, effective cutaneous evaporative cooling, low metabolic rate and total evaporative water loss, and the ability to tolerate considerable hypothermia. The combination of these factors presumably allows the crested pigeon to live in a wider range of habitats, including the mesic regions and hot desert areas, although its inclination to the temperate zones highlights the preferred conditions of this species.
Research seeking to measure the implications of climate change on ecosystems frequently detail the migratory patterns of birds such as crested pigeons as their model species. This is a consequence of birds presenting as good indicators of environmental change as characteristic behaviours, especially breeding, are responsive to climate, reflecting productivity at lower trophic levels. Aspects of breeding, such as participation and success, are generally influenced by climate. Inferences regarding increased reproductive behaviours can be measured in the density of bird populations within a given area, highlighting regions of high and low reproductive activity. It can be anticipated that some general relationships between breeding and climatic patterns will be evident due to resource availability and accessibility. With access to Climate Watch database, the relationship between climate and reproductive success of crested pigeon populations has been exemplified, with drastic changes in the species distribution throughout the state of Victoria. Examining pigeon sightings in the month of August over 5 successive decades, increased population density within the temperate southeast regions of the state become an observable trend, while those densities of northerly and easterly populations have either decreased or were maintained from 1970 onwards. When measured against the average annual temperature of the state over the last century, this becomes a trend suggestively mediated by increasingly arid conditions permitted by increased temperature. A clear spike can be deduced from the present graph between 1970 to present day, with average annual temperatures rising by approximately 0.65 degrees within the 45-year period. The temperature rise shows clear association with increased pigeon density in and around the city of Melbourne, which when compared to regions around both the New South and South Australian borders is far more temperate and cooler. A clear movement and subsequent differential population success between the pigeons' more northerly origins can be seen in the dramatic distribution changes. Inferentially, this is a consequence of climate change warming the state and causing the appearance of the species in new areas, as warmer temperatures enable them to live in environments that were previously too cold for them. Simultaneously, the original niches occupied by the species have been less suitable climatically due to proximity to Australia's central deserts.
In conclusion, it can be seen that over the observations that we have seen over the past semester, and observations have been taken over many years, the crested pigeon has begun to migrate further south over time. With the increase in temperature over the past 100 years, this could be the reason that the change in animals' behaviour. Climate change has had a major factor not only with crested pigeon, but also from the research done through Climate Watch, most plants and animals have been affected, and this can be seen through their behaviour. Climate Watch is an important system to keep track of what animals and plants are doing and how the climate is affecting it.